This research remains to be conducted. The present essay seeks to offer a contribution towards it, a reading hypothesis to add to the complex and problematic mosaic of the relation between the Church and the Jews in general, particularly after the Shoah, and most specifically in the immediate post-war period. By the Church, I do not mean in any sense the Catholic laity, but rather the Church as an ecclesiastic hierarchy, the Church as a political entity, and not as a theological authority. The Church in its public efforts, its social impact, and the consequences of its political choices. And to offer, with this reading, my own hypothesis concerning the causes and the motives that impelled the Church to remain silent. An odd and inexplicable silence which might suggest indifference and which stand in contrast to how much was written about the Jews, about the thorny question of anti-Semitism before and during the war. On the day after the liberation, at the end of the war, the Church was, in fact, locked into pre-existing mindsets that reflected a substantially reactionary conservative tendency, tied to authoritarian political outlooks and still entirely political in its manifestation. Tendency that also had marked, as Giovanni Miccoli, that is a scholar of the Church, has noted, the history of the relation between the Church and fascism, along a substantial collaboration, an encounter, and an alliance that were neither defensive nor a matter of convenience. Miccoli argued that the Church under fascism was recognized as part of the ruling bureaucracy, and I quote, a religion possessing prestige and social weight, that he had made it a pillar of the constituted order. End of quote. The alliance was not always peaceful, and new collision and tension, as in 1938, in the regime infringement of the 1929 Concordat, when the racial laws were applied to partners of mixed marriages. These and other conflicts, however, had not substantially damaged the collaboration between the two. In this context, it might be noted that after September 8, 1943, the date of the Italian surrender and the ouster of Mussolini, the Vatican Secretary of State instructed its own liaison with the Badoglio government not to support the repeal of the racial laws, as formally requested by the Jewish community, because, and I quote, according to the principle and tradition of the Church, such legislation still represented in the eyes of the Church, even after the fall of fascism, arrangements that merit confirmation. End of quote. In order to understand the difficult relationship between the Church and the memory of the deportation and extermination, one must be aware of the context. The atmosphere of spiritual anti-Semitism, to borrow Renato Moro's phrase, a theological ethical racism combined with the fear of modernity, the latter perceived and defined as anti-Christian. Such an atmosphere prevailed in the Church discourse before, during, and after the Shoah, until the Pope John XXIII encyclical Pacem in Terris of 1963, and for sure after Nostra Aetate. The post-war Church of Pio XII had not yet freed itself from the anti-Jewish polemic that, since the last decades of the 19th century, had marked traditional Catholicism all across Europe. In this polemic, and this attitude was itself influenced by all the old formulas and motives drawn from theological and religious discourse about the Jews' stubbornness and blindness, their guilt for deicide, their innate immorality and corruption, the diaspora as a result of a divine punishment, the practice of ritual murder as evidence of their anti-Christian hatred. All these had been supplemented and mixed with new political and social arguments that saw that growing Jewish influence on civil life, brought about by revolutionary emancipation, as an essential factor in the de-Christianization that threatened contemporary society.